it's more frustrating to fly late out of Ithaca, New York. It's even more frustrating to arrive over Detroit Circle for an hour. It's even more frustrating to then realize you missed your connection to Dallas. And then it's more frustrating to find out that on your flight to Dallas there's a medical emergency and you might have to divert. But the most frustrating is that pales into insignificance. I'm very, very frustrated because, as I'll try to show you in the next few minutes, some people in very high places not only are saying that continued expanded development of shale gas is good, it's good for climate. So I'm going to try to show you by some slides, some videos, some industry data, and some of the very latest science to this question, why we should be questioning these people in high places. And I'll name some of them. So first of all, you've by now heard that natural gas is a clean fossil fuel. The implication of the word clean doesn't mean that it's a better soap. The implication is that it produces less CO2 when burned and therefore is good for climate change. So let's investigate that. First of all, CO2 is not the only greenhouse gas. That's the single most important thing I need to say to you. And you need to say to the people who are in high places. Here's the recent history. Most of you all know this. Year, parts per million of CO2 concentration in the Earth's atmosphere, and it's continuing to rise. 350.org has made this a focal point of its thing. And the point here is that it's going up at about 2 parts per million. So what's that have to do with methane? What's that have to do with climate change and methane? What it means is that we're going to get to 450 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere in about 30 years, not 100 years. So when our president says we have 100 years supply of shale gas, we might not be around for the last 70 years to use it. So remember that number 30, because I'm going to tie that number 30 on my first slide to the last slide I'm going to show you. You'll pay attention between now and then, I hope. I emphasize that methane is a greenhouse gas. Legally, there was a Supreme Court decision that many of you are aware of not too long ago that declared that CO2 and other greenhouse gases are to be regulated by the EPA. Regulated equally. Why would we regulate methane any less than carbon dioxide? They're both greenhouse gases legally. And yet it's now taken a threatened lawsuit by 7 states against the EPA to begin enforcing regulations against methane emissions that they differentiate from enforcement of CO2 emissions. So there's something you can take home and tell people in high places, including your state regulators, state legislators, and the people in Washington. Why is methane so different? It's a greenhouse gas, legally. So why is it being ignored by the Obama administration, some large environmental groups, state regulators, and many in the media? Why are they monomaniacally focused on carbon dioxide? Let me give you some examples of how bad this has become. You all read the recent press, and you've heard the natural gas industry brag, that they alone are responsible for reducing carbon dioxide emissions over the last 4 or 5 years in the United States. Whoop-de-doo. The United States is behaving well, according to climate change people, because we're reducing carbon dioxide emissions. Well, there's 2 problems with that. Let me talk about both of them, so you can go home and tell your friends what the truth is. Here's a graph that shows a decrease in carbon dioxide emissions starting in about 2007. It's about a 10% decrease. That's good. Why did it decrease? The press let the industry get away with it. The president let the industry get away with it. Let's find out why carbon dioxide emissions decreased in the United States in the last 5 years. Here's the graph. I'll explain it to you. Had something not changed starting in 2007, This is the amount of emissions we would have seen. Forget about the units, it's a number. These are the emissions we actually saw last year. So the emissions went down, that's true. Carbon dioxide emissions went down in the last 5 years. Why? Well, primarily because we had very low economic growth. We had negative economic growth in the last 5 years. As economic growth goes down, or as economic production goes down, energy use goes down. The primary reason why CO2 production went down is because we didn't produce as much energy. Surprise, surprise. The United States is actually on a decreasing energy use curve. And then there's the carbon intensity of energy. What kind of energy did we actually consume over the last 5 years? Less of it, or more of it? So let's look at that graph. Here it is. So half of the reduction in CO2 is because we didn't have to produce as much energy. The other half, 38% of it comes from replacing coal and oil by natural gas. And the natural gas industry and our president claimed it was all because of that. In fact, increased production of wind, biomass, solar, and other renewables accounted for more of the reduction than the increase in the use of methane to replace coal for electricity generation. That's the truth. With me so far? Let's get to the other issue. What about methane? In the last 5 years, over the last 1,000 years, methane concentration in the atmosphere has been going up. So in the last 5 years, carbon dioxide concentration went down, mostly because of renewable, supplanting fossil fuels. That's good for all of us. But here's the historical record starting in the year 1000, and as you can see, methane concentration started to go up with the Industrial Revolution. Some would claim that that's proof that methane concentration increase is due to human activity, as is carbon dioxide activity, but nobody gets play on that. You don't see that on the front page of the New York Times. Look at the most recent record of methane concentration in the atmosphere, and again, it's continuing to rise. So what? Isn't carbon dioxide the whole story? That's all you ever hear about. If we're going to combat climate change, we have to get a handle on carbon dioxide. We have to have carbon dioxide reduction measures, legal, physical, chemical. We have to tax carbon dioxide. Poor little methane. Doesn't get any respect. Okay, here's the problem. And if you didn't know this, you got to know this. Even though methane is called the third greenhouse gas after water vapor and carbon dioxide, it's the most potent greenhouse gas. What does that mean? It's potent. What does that mean? One methane molecule, a little CH4, one carbon dioxide molecule, a little CO2. You put them both in the atmosphere. Which one creates the potential for warming? The methane molecule. Why? Because of atmospheric chemistry. I'm not an expert. Go read about it. But it's true. Well, how much more potent is methane than carbon dioxide? Depends on how long you're willing to wait to measure it. If you're willing to wait 100 years and say, that methane molecule that we put in the atmosphere today, what did it do compared to a carbon dioxide molecule over 100 years? It was 33 times more effective. That's bad. 33 times more effective at heating the atmosphere. If we're only going to wait 20 years, it's 105 times more effective. I'll say that in a different way right here. If 1% of all the methane produced from a shale gas well never gets burned but gets leaked, either accidentally or purposefully, and I'll show you versions of both accidental and purposeful leaking of methane into the atmosphere from shale gas wells, if 1% of the production of a well gets leaked and doesn't get burned, that's the same thing as if you burned it twice. So very small quantities of methane can have a very large effect on climate change. That's also the most important thing I'm going to tell you today. Actually, everything I tell you today is really important. And you're going to have to decide which is the most important of the important things I'm telling you, but that's really important. A very small leakage of methane, something in the order of 1 or 2% of all the production of methane in the world, is the same thing as doubling the carbon dioxide emissions. Wow. Now, you don't have to believe me. So I'll show you first of all where it's leaking from, and I'll tell you about how much it's leaking, and then we'll talk about the science. So where does methane leak during the whole life cycle of shale gas? First and foremost, during drilling. On the way down, there's methane coming up. They don't capture that. They don't flare it. They don't put it into production. It just gets vented. Standard operating procedure. During frack flowback, I'll actually show you a video of that. When all that flowback fluid's coming up, there's a lot of concentrate, a lot of gas in it. And as Deborah just said, the right thing to do is capture it, send it to market, if you have a pipeline. Otherwise, you either flare it. That's burning off our grandchildren's inheritance. It's a waste of a natural resource that companies get paid to do. Or you vent it. Routinely and continuously at the well site, during liquid unloading, during gas processing, during about compressor station leaks sometime today, and of course during transmission, storage, and distribution through pipelines. That's where all the venting and getting occurs. Some of it's purposeful, some of it's accidental. I'm going to give you two examples. One, what's called upstream. That's industry terminology for things that are happening on the well pad. And then I'll take you all the way downstream. Look at leakage from distribution pipelines running under our cities. So is Frank here? Yeah, thanks, Frank. That's that Frank. So Frank sent me this picture 2 years ago. Normal camera. This is during a flowback procedure on a well in Dimmick. So they drilled the well, fracked the well, they're flowing back. And this is visual light. This is water vapor coming off the flowback pit. And then the next slide is going to be, next picture is going to be a video that Frank took using FLIR. And as you know, forward-looking infrared enables us to see things the human eye can't see. And it's going to be in false color. Is it that? Yeah, you just go ahead. Go to the next slide.